Greetings. This is Renee Carnley presenting her midterm report for the Identity and Access Management for the Internet of Things, specifically looking at the potential of radio frequency identification technology. Now, within the foreseeable future, the volume of Internet of Things devices will explode. From personal devices to industry, including government, the Internet has become the primary means of communication. I mean, our refrigerators are talking to our toasters, our toasters are talking to our coffee makers. I mean, what have we not connected to the Internet yet, right? And with this increase, you can see that the demand for trusted digital identity is only going to skyrocket. And NISA reports that with this IoT increase and with the cloud computing usage, that securing the perimeter is one of the biggest challenges facing cybersecurity professionals. In addition, the report warned that hackers are competing to enslave more and more IoT devices. Now, how are we going to trust that when we connect another device to the Internet, or when we connect a device to another device, that we can trust that the network that we're connecting to, or that the network that we're connected to, can trust us? Well, public key infrastructure has a 20-plus year history that's worth investigating as an IoT solution. Identity and access management is generally defined as the framework of policies and technologies that assure authorized people within an organization have the appropriate access to network resources. As we have more people online, as we have more devices online than people, there's an exponential demand for trusted machine identities. Organizations need to know and understand how to support machine credentialing and how to securely manage the demand for them. IAM provides that solution. Now, the framework that currently exists is authentication, authorization, identity management, and federated identity management. Most security professionals probably are already familiar with these, but for those that aren't, I'm going to go over it a bit because it's important to understand the gist of IAM and how it relates to PKI for us to understand how we're going to create a framework that encompasses all of the IoT devices. Now, authentication basically is that it confirms that the identity of a user. For instance, when Joe tells me he's Joe, I can trust that Joe is really Joe. The authentication does that. Authorization ensures that Joe only has access to the services and resources to which he is entitled. And identity management is the overall system that provides this authentication and authorization. Federated identity management, that's the system of trust. It's usually the third-party system that stores all this information and the credentials that allows us to trust this authorization and authentication piece of identity management. Now, public key infrastructure has for years been the means in which we manage digital certificates for people, for machines, and for devices. And how it works is that you have a key pair, a public and a private key, that depends upon a chain of trust for certification authorities. And to make it work at the level that IoT is going to demand, we need to have a careful, orchestrated chain and root of trust that we can depend upon and that we rely on. As PKI has proven itself for 20 plus years, we're looking at it as a roadmap to meeting this IoT solution. In order to see how it's a roadmap, you got to kind of understand what it's currently providing and the bits and pieces that we currently have. Currently, PKI consists of a path validation. When you present your certificate, your public key, basically, which, say, for example, for the DoD is used as a common access card. When you present that to a system or a network, the public key must be authenticated. can I be assured that Joe is Joe? Again, that same situation. Well, the path validation as you're presented here shows you the means to that. This authentication has a certifying authority that validates that that public key is valid. So you present your public key from the client to the server. The server has access to the certification authority that has stored your private key, and then it confirms that you are who you say you are. Now, the path validation relies upon a path construction in order to complete the validation process. And the path construction is more complicated than path validation. And all of these rules for this path, as you see laid out in this diagram here, is based upon the X509 PKI standard. And so for the length of time and for the length of to keep the paper within the confines of the requirements, you can refer to the K509 PKI standard for more details. But the gist is that the root CA generates its own self-signed certificate, and then once the root CA is established, it binds the identity and the public key of an intermediate CA. The intermediate CA launches the next CA in the path, and so on until the path reaches the end users who seek a certificate. Now, what are we going to use to replace the common access card that houses our public key? Well, we're looking at radio frequency identification. It's a load-powered system consisting of a tag that acts as a transmitter and a reader that acts as the receiver. RFID is currently the preferred method of wireless communication among IoT devices. Now, within this current system, as it exists, the reader is more at risk than the tag. So think about it. The tag is basically a read-only device, and it houses your public key. If your public key gets taken, so say whether it's your CAC or you lose your CAC, well, you're still good to go. We're relying upon the reader, and you can report that the tag has been stolen, and that would immediately be canceled out, and you can be issued another one. The reader, on the other hand, it's more at risk. The reader requires power, for instance. It requires software, and it requires the storing of the entire path construction and the path validation. So you can see how, being a much more complicated system, if it were to be stolen or lost or compromised, well, you no longer have trust in the system. If you can't trust that the reader is honorable and not at risk of doing something malicious, then you don't want to present your tag to it. So we need a system in which we can provide a safe and secure reader. Now, near-field communication is a very simplistic implementation of RFID technology. It also consists of two wireless devices communicating, and it has two modes, the passive and the active mode. Within a smartphone, this NFC chip currently exists in most smartphones. Like the smartphone you currently have right there, you have this NFC. More than likely, you have this NFC chip in it. And within your smartphone, you have both roles available to you, because this chip can act as the reader and it can act as the tag. This opens up a whole wide gamut to more usage than just the general RFID. Now, the near-field communication as it exists on the previous slide has the same vulnerability that the overarching RFID does, but a secure protocol has been presented to enhance the security within this NFC chip, and it utilizes symmetric cryptography. Now, this symmetric cryptography consists of a processing stack that's defined here as these 5 pieces. And it's handshaking, certificate verification, signature verification, processing data, and an alert mechanism. And it all is contained in this one additional piece that we call the security protocol. And how it works is the process begins the handshaking scheme by asking for a certificate. If the certificate and the signature match, then the data is stored for further processing. If at any time there is an error, for example, the signature and the certificate cannot be verified, then the data is discarded from the system and alert messages are transmitted. Now, this proposed system has been tested and found to adequately protect against tag manipulation and data insertion. The only negative is that as you increase the signature size, then the processing time also increases. Thus, if you want to save processing time, you need to use a smaller signature. But bottom line is, this was found to be secure against the major threats facing RFID, which is being able to manipulate a tag by inserting things or even reading it because it's RFID. But you throw in some cryptography and you now have this added layer of protection that has currently been found to work. Now, where are we going with this in the future? As far as the rest of the semester goes, as far as me, the symmetric cryptography solution is not the only solution that exists out there. There are also solutions that have been implemented using asymmetric cryptography, specifically AES and ECC. I want to spend the rest of the semester looking into those solutions, and then I want to compare them. I want to compare and see, is one better than the other? Or maybe one might be more useful for this implementation than another, and those type of things. But as it currently exists, you can see that we have provided an IAM framework for utilizing PKI. The possibilities of having your smartphone be a means of identification that we can trust is just, the possibilities are endless, honestly. Think about it. Your smartphone can now become your entry into a building. Your smartphone can now become not only your entry into another physical device, but your smartphone itself can become a trusted computing device that you can utilize a whole lot more on a framework. Currently, your bring your own device is discouraged because of the security concerns. We're looking at a means of providing a solution to that. That would save costs for companies if you can bring your own device. Right now, the cost of like the government or a personal industry business buying a secondary phone for that person just so they can access things from work from a phone is really, really high. It's into the millions. So just that alone, we're looking at being able to provide a solution for bring your own device, which currently there isn't one. So I'm excited about where this is going. I'm excited about what I found for the solution. I ran into some disappointments here and there with the research because everything that I was finding at first was showing that RFID was not going to be a viable solution, that it was insecure, that it was showing me all the ways that it could be hacked into, etc. Until I found these symmetric and asymmetric cryptography solutions. I've only had time to really delve into the symmetric one, and as I've already mentioned, I'm really excited about looking into the asymmetric cryptography. My personal opinion of it is that asymmetric cryptography has, at least in my implementation of them, found themselves to be more secure. So that's kind of why I saved those for last. So, all right, well, I'm looking forward to reporting my findings in our final report here in a few weeks. Otherwise, thank you for your time, and ciao.